my best, but probably anything I say is provisional today. So our aim is really to work through the Gemara in the time available. So it's a late start. So the Gemara asked on the Kuf Beis in the base, the Gemara asked Kol Shulamai Chazia, and all I really want to say on that is that as per the last year, there are other sugyas which seem to give other measures or other ways of looking at things. For example, in many cases of a melachot, there's a shiur of two, for example, shtei osius or shtei chutin, and for example, shtei chutin, I think I mentioned the Gemara in Kuf Gimel on the base, which I think we've seen already, where Rashi says, even though it's not a melacha shlema, b'makom acher, nonetheless, that's how things work. You can't weave a garment in one day. You have to build things slowly. You have to create things slowly, and each stage therefore has its own chashivas. So basically, I think we came out that there were four, to the best of my ability, there seems to be four sorts of measures of melachos. Measure number one is a gregares, is a shiur, halacha Moshe Messinai shiur. For example, a gregares with food-related melachos like bishul and the like. Measure number two seems to be two as a number, like shtei osius or shtei chutin, and either this is also halacha Moshe Messinai or as the Ritva says, Mosru l'chachomim. That too is some form of chashivas. Then we saw other melachos, like there's the whole period of Hamatzniah with Hitzah, where it seems to depend on chashivas, and there it doesn't need to have been in the Mishkan. It's a proper chashivas, and there it doesn't need to have been in the Mishkan. And finally, we've got with Choresh and Boneh, and maybe Makom Patish, maybe not. The Kol Shehu is a shiur, which is not halacha Moshe Messinai shiur at all. It's just culture. As long as there's some utility to it, that's enough. And there Tosfos explains that you need to find it in the Mishkan in order for it to have some chashivas. And there also there's halacha that you need, according to Rashi, Yeshiva-style kain. Right, it has to be at least some people leave it as it is. So even though my intention is to go on and build more, nonetheless there has to be Yeshiva-style kain, and then that would be enough. So even though with Oreg, for example, Rashi said explicitly, you don't need Yeshiva-style kain. That's because, and it's just a stage in weaving the whole garment. That's because there it has the shiur of two and kach mosru chachamim. Here, where there isn't a shiur, there has to be Yeshiva-style kain, even though my intention is to carry on building. And even in Hamatzniah, you don't need to find it in the Mishkan. That's because it's a proper chashivas. Here, where it's a minimal chashivas, you need to find it in the Mishkan. They seem to be just sort of the scan of Masechet Shabbat, the four types of measures that we find. I don't really know where they all came from and why different melachos have this different nature. But that's more or less a summary of what we said last time. Is that reasonably clear to everyone? Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. We move on. So the Gemara asks, the Gemara gives another teretz. It says Shekain, So the Gemara says that there is an example of a binyan kol shehu with a in milat alma, that means in human needs, where you have where you have a little hole and you need to plug the little hole in your furniture or the like, or in your building or the like. And similarly in the Mishkan, when there was a little hole in one of the kroshim, you plug that hole, and that's enough to be a melacha. So you have a building which has a little hole in it, and you plug the hole, and people are makpid, right? Even a tiny hole in your house would bother you, and you would plug that hole. Similarly, in the Mishkan, even a tiny hole in the keresh you would plug. I think I printed in the source sheets the Meiri, who discusses why this wouldn't be Yesh Binyan Mekadim. I think I printed it. Actually, Meiri asked this question twice. He asked this Legabe Pitpute Kira, and he asked Legabe Keresh and Offel Beidana. Why is this not Binyan and Shiur Bekadim? And Tosfos also speaks about this issue of binyan v'stira b'kelim, with later on in the Gemara, we're not yet up to there, but ayol shufza b'kafina, so where you put a handle or a peg into into an axe. So it seems that when you have an axe head and you have a handle, a wooden handle that goes into the axe head, and then you have a little peg that holds the handle in place. And that's a Gemara later that talks about binyan in that scenario. We haven't yet done that. That's the bottom of the Amud. So in all these cases, the question is whether yesh binyan v'stira b'kelim, how this ties in, how you can connect to our sugya. In other words, the bottom line is that there is some cases of binyan and stira b'kelim, but it doesn't exactly work like a proper like a binyan which is mechubar l'karka. And there's a number of chilukim that are given. Tosfos, for example, says that with binyan gomel there is binyan and stira b'kelim, but not with something which isn't a binyan gomel, and we need to work out exactly what the chiluk is. We'll see that maybe when we get to the bottom of the Amud. The Meiri here asks the question, the Gabe pit put kira. So the Gemara earlier, maybe I should have started with the Gemara earlier. The Gemara says that some form of, as far as I can picture, some form of tripod that sits on the ground, a little like you have in a science lab. So you have a little stand that sits over a little flame, like a portable camping stove, I suppose is the equivalent. So some of these little stoves maybe will have a very small flame underneath, and you put a little tripod on top of it, and you stick a pot on top of that. And again, the Meiri asked the question that's and the binyan is that you dig a little dip in indentation in the ground, it seems, in order to establish the kira on firm footing. So the Meiri brings from the Yishalmi that the Kroshim were mechubaros to the Adonim, and therefore that's called binyan. Very interesting. So even though the Mishkan is mobile and the pieces of the Mishkan are taken and put away, nonetheless it's mechubar Adonim, and that's called mechubar karka. That's what the Meiri says, and then he says the Gabe put a kira. He says, so it seems that the kira also is mechubar l'karka. I don't know exactly what to make of this. Maybe seems to be saying that that even a temporary building that's attached to the grounds, even temporarily, doesn't have this weakness of binyan mekadim. I'm not entirely sure what exactly the gather of this is. He then brings, by the way, the Gemara that we may have seen when we looked at. I have a feeling we saw this Gemara before. The Gemara seems to say that there's a chashivas of Mishkan, that the Mishkan is deemed not to be temporary but permanent. In other words, even though the Mishkan moves from place to place, but each place where it is, it's al pi Hashem yachnu, al pi Hashem yisou, and therefore when it's there, this is its sort of permanent place to be. And then there's like a new divine decree for them to move on. But since it's al pi Hashem yachanu, al pi Hashem yisou, that when it needs to be there, this is its place to be. That's deemed as l'olam. That gives it an extra chashivas. But either way, that's the Meiri. The Ritva, I printed the Ritva also, who seems to go along a similar line to Tosfos, that says that when it's a keli made of parts which you attach and detach, that's where there's a weakness of ein binyan b'kelim. But where it's making something from the start, in other words, it's not just something that's designed to be attached and detached, then there is binyan b'kelim. Yeah.
More fundamentally, the Gemara's given three cases. Hofei Gumud, we put a kira neck of the birat on.
Yeah.
Okay. We started off understanding Boneh as being potentially one of four things, of which we were smoothing the ground, we were doing the machale, we were putting together different halakim into things. There were massive two things, possibly Ohel and possibly
a nekev in Melul or something like that, yeah.
None of these seem to fall classically into those four categories, possibly the nekev at the end. But I was just thinking of them more fundamentally. where the Hofer Guma and the Pupute Kira falls into in terms of those, because don't we have to put it into one of those things?
So Pitpute Kira, I understood Ilule de Meiri to be a melachot in the ground, that you're making a little indentation in the ground in order to establish the tripod.
Wasn't putting the legs themselves together into
Yeah.
what you're doing as opposed to the ground.
Yeah. Well, what is the case of Pitpute Kira? Did anyone manage to work out exactly what the scenario is? What exactly the case is? If it's Sofer Gummon, then I don't understand the Miri, right? If it's that you're making a little hole in the ground. Rashi says Pitpute Ragli Kira Kumin Kli Bazel Shkoin tripods. So I guess that's read Rashi. Mamida Nakira Shel Cheres. So you put the pot on top of it. How did you understand the scenario of this tripod? I understood that you have to fix it somehow to the ground. In which case, I'm not sure I understand the Meiri at all. I mean, is it chayfa? Is it this little chafira that's the thing? Yeah, a little hole in the ground. So that if that's the case, then that's not the Meiri, right? The Meiri says it's a malacha b'kedim. I didn't understand the Meiri. It's not a malacha in the kedi. It's a malacha in the ground. You're making a little hole in the ground. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's why it shows in case there's a very small tripod. So
No, 100%. But what's the malacha?
the melachot is the attachment of the leg, which is kosher to the tripod.
So that's the culture definitely. That's the Gemara. That's why it's explaining as culture. Is the malacha the attaching of the legs to the tripod?
Yes, it's like so that's the
Yeah.
kosher.
That's how the Meiri seems to understand, because he says that this is a malacha in a kedi. I know. Either way, so either the malacha is a chor in the ground, in which case it's that's malacha, or it's chibur of parts together, attaching parts together, in which case that's another example of classic malacha. And this plugging of the hole would also be chibur, attaching parts together. That would be the malacha. That's what would appear to be the case. But binyan chayfer guma is creating a new space, creating a space.
I noticed, but of the four categories that we started off with, leveling, land.
Either leveling because that's making space, or chayfer guma. The Rambam put them together. We saw in the Rambam at the beginning. The Rambam put them together. Sorry, no, the Rambam didn't bring it. We saw that in the Gemara in sorry, apologies. We saw that in the Gemara in Ein Gimel, straight after the mission of Kal Gadol. That
it wasn't in the initial Shiur, one of the.
Sorry, yes, that's fair enough. Yes, sorry, apologies. Yeah, making a hole also is creating a new space.
So there's a fifth thing there.
When you said it, in my mind I was grouping that together with smoothing the tell or filling the dip. That's creating space. The lomdus of
you're actually making a hole.
But if that's a useful space, you've made a space, like making a cupboard or something like that. The reason I'm including it in that category is because there's no attaching of parts, there's no creating of a wall, putting bricks on top of each other. There's no yel, but you're creating a space in the usability of ground. That's also called a melacha. Yeah. The other thing I was very puzzled about is this keresh where you're plugging the hole. First of all, I'm not sure why it's not ein anius but makom ashirus entirely. But secondly, if I understood correctly, is that you're plugging with lead? Is that right?
Yeah.
What's the keresh normally made of? So how can I don't know in Hilchas Mishkan I wasn't entirely sure how you can plug a hole in the keresh with lead. What's the halacha, because it's rove wood still. Don't know. It's just interesting. Sorry. Yeah, but that's the halacha. The pasuk says have metal sockets and you put the beams into the sockets, but the beams are meant to be made of wood.
We do have wood coated in metal.
When the pasuk says, for the oren, for example, that's halacha. The oren is made of wood and then it's covered with gold. How can we just take into our own hands to? I don't know. I'm just since we're learning Gemara, I'm just sharing with you my little bit of confusion. Okay, so if anyone has any clear understanding of the mitzias of what these things are, I'd be very grateful. But anyway, that's That's what we're up to. All I'm really pointing out for now is just have a look at the Rishonim, different svaras in Binyan, Yesh Binyan Bekedim or not. Either basically two Mahalchim in the Rishonim, either the Ritva and Tosfos that begin getting into the nitty-gritty, and basically their thesis is that Kalim, there's not a rule that Ein Binyan Bekedim or Ein Stira Bekedim. It's just that when it comes to building grounds attached to the grounds Binyan, then there's a lower threshold of what would be called a binyan, whereas with kalim, because kalim are portable and less choshev, you need a higher threshold to cross the bar of what would be called binyan, and then we'd have a piece of work to do to work out exactly how to define these two thresholds, not so clear cut. That's one mahalach, and the alternative mahalach is the meiri, that this is called a melachot b'karka. Why? Because you attach the keresh to the grounds and you attach the tripod to the grounds. If by the way, the melachot of the tripod is that you're attaching the leg to the tripod, I understand very well why the Meiri asked this question, that this has been in Mekadim. But then what exactly is his answer? So what's the answer to the question? The kira will eventually be mechubar l'karka. Therefore, even when you attach the leg to it, that's called boneh. What's the malacha? The fixing of the kira to the grounds, or the attaching of the leg to the tripod? Fixing the tripod to the grounds, or attaching of the leg to the tripod? Which one is the malacha? If it's attaching the leg to the tripod, then maybe ask that's been in mekadim. If it's attaching the tripod to the grounds, then is that called binyan mekadim? Maybe it's the same question. He's saying it's binyan mekadim because it's just temporary, like he asked for the kira. I don't know. I'm a little. Yeah.
According to Rashi,
Yes.
he doesn't hold binyan mekalim whatsoever, no matter what the threshold is. Is that correct to say? Or is it incorrect?
I don't know. I should know. We need to. I need to do Chazara, which is I'm being a bit vague here on Ein Gimel on it. We learned this on I think Ein Daled on the base. We looked at the Tosfos there and so on. I'm not entirely sure.
But is it? I think it's the men's volume on Madonna for the Tom Greens. There's all the cases where Rashi implies all of those cases are Makeh B'Patish. You're not.
Yes.
Not Boneh.
Yeah, but does that mean that Rashi doesn't hold at all of Binyan Mekalim? That's what I'm saying. I'm not sure because how would Rashi answer our Gemara? Right. So would even Rashi agree that there's some threshold at which Yesh Binyan Mekalim or not? Yeah. Okay. I'm being a little vague here because we need to dedicate like a proper session to Binyan Mekalim in its own right. It's its own sugya. All I'm really saying here is these are some of the Maram Komis Sugabi, this child of Yesh Binyan Mekalim, Ein Binyan Mekalim. Yeah. Okay, let's try and get a little bit of energy. We've got a few minutes left. I don't know about anyone else, but I'm feeling a little low energy. Let's do our best. Shmuel, Omer Shmuel. So let's try and at least start that. Hamatzati des Evan, and so on. Chayiv. So, and then the Gemara says that there's 3 levels of building. The lower, so basically Shmuel says that if you're Matzadi de Evan, which is Rashi says that you sort of move the stone around until it sort of sits well on the ground. That would be called Boneh, even though there's no cement that's used. So I'm picturing you have ground and you have a sort of rock, and if you move the rock around, eventually the ground forms a shape around the rock, and it sits straight in the ground, and that Rashi said would be Boneh. So basically, seating a stone on the ground so that it sits well and can serve as a foundation for a wall, that's Shmuel's Chiddush, that's called Boneh, even without it being fixed in place. You don't need a cement to bind something in place for it to be Melachas Boneh. It's enough that it sits and is fixed well in place. That's already enough to be Melachas Boneh. And then the Gemara says different scenarios. Boneh. I suppose all I'll do in the little bit of time available is just draw your attention to the Rabbeinu Chananel and the Rambam, which I printed, and then next year we'll try and learn this a little bit more. But Ian, so Rashi and Tosfos assume that the Malacha is Boneh. Rabbeinu Chananel and the Rambam learn that the Malacha is Makeh B'Patish. Omer Shmuel Mitzadid Evan Chayv Mishum Makeh B'Patish. Perish Mitzadid Miyashiv Evan B'Karka Gedei Livnei Soleh. And then he brings the maskana the rach that there's tolosa binyana, etc. But he says it's Makeh B'Patish. Similarly, the Rambam in Perek Yud Halach Yud Beis brings all the malachas of Boneh. We saw this Rambam ready in Halach Yud Beis. And the Rambam says that Nadvach Elyon, the top row of bricks, Afidu Heres Evan V'Nichal Gabei Tit Chayev. That's if you put on the top row of stones, that's Boneh. And Halach Yud Ches says Hamatzadid es even v'yesod habinyan. If you mitzadid, you move side to side to fix firmly the stone at the yesod of the binyan. V'tiknim biyadav yeshiva b'makam haroyla chay mishamakam b'patish. Yechai mishamakam b'patish. The Rambam has a very strange reading of the Gemara really. Because it's okay in Omar Shmuel Hamatzadid es even chayev. He learns it's a new sugya. It's nothing to do with Boneh. This is now Melaches Makam Patish. Why does the Gemara bring it here? I suppose because of the continuation. Because some of the other scenarios would be Boneh. Then the Gemara says that Tolosa Binyana Hava. There's three types of building. Tata Metzia Ve'ila, the lowest level, the middle level, and the top level. Tata, the lowest level, Boy Tzudud Afra. You need to move it in place and make sure that it sits firmly in the dust. And that is Makam B'Patish according to the Rambam and the Rabbeinu Chamanel. Metzia Boy Namitina and Eloi Banach Balma, which the Rambam learns to mean the middle level needs double cement and the top level needs just the lowest layer of cement. But that's Mishum Melachas Boneh. So all I'm doing now for now is just the maths of the Sukkah. That's how the Rambam learns the Gemara. Very strange, but that's how the Rambam learns the Gemara and the Rabbeinu Chanan learns the Gemara. By the way, just in terms of Derech HaLimud, very often the Rabbeinu Chanan and the Rambam go in the same Halacha. They belong to the same Beis HaMedrash. The Rabbeinu Chanan was the Rebbe of the Rebbe of the Rebbe of the Rambam. Basically, there's a chain of tradition there. So Rabbeinu Chanan, who taught the Rimegash, in turn taught the Rambam. So they belong to the same Beis HaMedrash. But either way, that's for now. I'll just suffice with that. That there's a machlokas. On the one hand, we have Rashi and Tosfos and the Rishonim in that Beis Medrash who learn that the melacha is Boneh, and for Boneh there's no requirement that you should need cement. Boneh doesn't mean sticking things together. Boneh means even placing a stone to be part of a building would be sufficient for Boneh, as long as this is a reasonable way to build. And since with foundations, as long as it sits in place, that's enough. That would be sufficient with the melacha. And the Rambam says it's not Boneh, that's Makah B'Patish. If you're not cementing it and fixing it in place, that's not Boneh, that's Makah B'Patish. Why is it Makah B'Patish? Because you're fixing something without it being any other melacha. Something like that would be the reading of the Rambam. Yeah, it's a lot of binyanim. There's three types of building. One of them is not melachas Boneh, it's melachas Makah B'Patish. Yeah.
The mission is talking about Boneh, but also treating it as Makam.
Yeah. In the Mishnah, at least it calls it Makah B'Patish. So it's listing. The Mishnah is listing kol shehu things, and it lists Boneh, and then it lists Makah B'Patish. There's two scenarios of kol shehu. At least it labels it as a separate melacha. Here in Shmuel, it's a little bit more difficult. Why is it bringing Shmuel over here when Shmuel's a chiddush in Makah B'Patish? The answer is, I think, according to Dama, only because of the continuation. That we see halachas about Metzia and Elah, the middle row and the top row, where indeed it's Boneh, but indeed the foundation row is not Boneh. Okay, we'll stop here, Rabbi Sai, and hope everyone gets a chance to have a bit of a shluff today. To share, man. Little other videos, Yishnaim also. Yeah.
You still okay to chat a little bit?
Yes. Yeah. Let's do this.